Welcome back to Buckeyes Now on Sports Illustrated. After a Tuesday afternoon press conference, this is the Buckeye Report. Along with Andrew Lind, I'm Brendan Gulick. Andrew, this was a press conference that is usually designated for talking about the upcoming opponent. That's not what today's press conference was about. Today's press conference was largely about just figuring out how to ask every different way possible questions about the defense, potential staff changes, potential not necessarily job changes, but, different dereliction of duties. Ryan Day answered the questions poignantly, and I thought he answered them firmly, made it pretty apparent he was not happy with what he saw on tape or with what he felt on Saturday when when his team lost to Oregon at home. But I think the biggest thing I took away from is that he said he wants to make sure he reacts and not overreacts to figuring out a way to get this thing fixed.
Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of discuss the fact that nothing was really said in terms of how changes are going to happen, because he, obviously doesn't want to give away too much or really let us in on the details of behind the scenes. But it's very clear that he's not happy with a number of different things defensively on Saturday, and those things are going to need to be fixed.
I'm not surprised in the least that he's going to try to keep internal conversations internal. He's never going to answer certain questions. I guess, we have to do our jobs to ask those questions, but, asking him to reveal the details of conversations with with other coaches or, any of that kind of stuff that's done behind closed doors, it's done behind closed doors for a reason. It's not going to get out into the media. And it shouldn't, right? There should be some level of Ryan Day is the CEO of Ohio State football, and he should be able to talk with the other guys that are helping him run that business, because essentially Ohio State football is a massive conglomerate business. They should have the opportunity to have some private conversations, probably some tough ones. And while he said they weren't uncomfortable, I can't imagine that they were comfortable. There's going to be some frustrations, right? I mean, I think everybody in any walk of life experiences that. You have some clashing, right? Things aren't working the way that you envision. And maybe the good thing for the Buckeyes is that these things happen early enough in the season that they have a chance to correct them with this team and can still pursue that their national championship aspirations are not totally gone, but they sure did take a massive hit.
Yeah, and obviously the one side of it, it's not uncomfortable for him because he's not the one that's kind of under the microscope, at least not yet, in terms of that. Now, obviously, if things don't change, then maybe the pressure kind of turns on him to make a decision. Obviously, his job isn't in jeopardy or anything of that kind of sort, but the pressure will turn on from being specifically on Kerry Coombs to then maybe on him to make a decision and change some things. So, I appreciated what he said about the conversations weren't uncomfortable, but they were honest. And I think that that's the key. You don't kind of want to butter up everybody and say, oh, well, it was a good opponent, we're going to learn from it, this and that. Like, that doesn't do any good. It hasn't done any good since Alabama. It didn't do any good after Minnesota. And obviously, they needed to have these conversations to move on from it.
I totally hear what you're saying, but I think I might disagree slightly in the sense that there is pressure on Ryan Day here. You're right. His job is not immediately in jeopardy like it might appear that Kerry Coombs or other defensive staff changes could be more on the hot seat. And I think that's where you're coming from. But Ryan Day's job is constantly on the line, right? I mean, he has said several times over, you're not allowed to lose around here. There's an exceptionally high, almost unachievably high standard set at Ohio State. It's kind of the nature of the beast. They've done this to themselves by being so good for so long in a world where, when things inevitably once in a while go wrong, alarm bells start firing and sounding everywhere. I mean, look what's gone on up in Michigan. Jim Harbaugh he's in a totally different situation from Ryan Day because they haven't been a consistent winner and on the national scene. And yet the expectations at that program are high. And look at I mean, every day things are being written about him left and right. He should be fired. He should make this move. He should make that move. So I guess I just look at it from that perspective, that when you are the head coach at one of these monster programs around college football, Clay Helton had like 18 games above 500 at USC. At a lot of schools, that's great. At USC, sayonara, right? And so to me, I just think there is an element of you can't afford to be wrong. Certainly not too often.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that kind of goes back to, hiring Coombs in the first place. There have been plenty of questions asked about his credentials leading up to that. He was obviously a terrific high school coach, came to Ohio State, produced numerous first-round cornerbacks, then went to the NFL. And I mean, I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I know his defense wasn't like tremendous or anything like that. He was the secondary coach there, but then to come back and never have play calling duties or anything like that. And then, there's obviously challenges in how he has to go forward.
And again, I really don't want this to become a rag on Kerry Coombs fest, because I really like the guy. I mean, I enjoy his energy and his passion. I will never question his dedication to his craft. His players clearly like him. Like, there are so many things about Kerry Coombs as a guy and as a coach that I'm personally drawn to, but I'm also objective, and I think he is too. He owned it after the game on Saturday. Saturday's performance was terrible. Like, defensively, it was not good, and by any stretch of the imagination, it wasn't good enough. So I think there has to be some separation of, liking someone, appreciating what they do for the program and the things that he does bring to Ohio State, and the results that Saturday, and unfortunately somewhat in week one and somewhat against Alabama last year, were also present there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head right there with, there are two separate ways to look at it, because I completely agree with you. Like Coombs is one of my all-time favorite coaches from a standpoint of the energy he brings, just the enjoyment, the type of person he is. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to results on the field. It doesn't matter like what you're doing. You could be the number one recruiter in the country 10 years in a row, but if your unit is slacking, like that at some point there's a disconnect there. And we're kind of reaching that point where if, he can continue to recruit all these great players, but if those great players are coming in and they're not producing under his watch, then there's an issue there.
Yeah. And look, I don't want to belittle anybody in the building either. These guys are all adults. They know what they signed up for, and they know this is a results-based business. And, the Nick Sabans of the world are so few and far between. That it's just so rare that, people start talking about you in the light that they're going to build a statue to you. I mean, think about what Nick Saban did down in Alabama. He literally, I think, surpasses Paul Bryant as the best coach in Alabama history. That thought prior to Nick Saban's tenure was like absolutely ludicrous, right? And there are just not very many people that have that kind of stability in their jobs. And so these guys know that at the end of the day, you got to produce. And if you're not producing, you got to figure out why, and you may not have a long time to figure out why. That's just kind of the nature of college coaching.
And to kind of go, speaking of Saban, specifically, it makes me wonder, because there's always kind of been a loyalty aspect to it at Ohio State that I don't know that I see necessarily at Alabama. Like the coaches there, players there, all that seem to have a shorter leash than maybe they do at Ohio State. And I wonder if, if that kind of goes into the thinking of, hey, this is our guy. This is, Kerry Coombs has done great things for us. We're going to, give him some time to see if he can figure it out. And it obviously helps that they have Tulsa, Akron, Maryland, Rutgers, before you get into anything significant that's going to test you. So, if you're going to focus on those things and say, okay, well, we're going to small improvements here and there and like just focus better and all those kind of things, like then maybe he's able to turn it around, and we're not having this conversation in a month.
And I thought Austin Ward asked a great question at the end of the press conference. We basically said, look, you're playing Tulsa and Akron and Rutgers and Maryland the next 4 weeks. And it's no disrespect to those four opponents who might at times give you some competitive play. But the Buckeyes are going to be heavily favored in those 4 games. I actually think Tulsa's a decent football team, and they've had some offensive success. Their defense just isn't very good, and I don't see them stopping Ohio State at all. The Akron Zips, their program is not in a great place right now. Rutgers is better than they've been, but they're not at Ohio State's caliber. And I think you can say the same thing about Maryland. If the Buckeyes don't convincingly win these next 4 games, I think a lot of people are going to be pretty surprised. So Austin's question was essentially, given that, how do you define success at the end of those next 4 games? What do you need to see, Ryan Day, to know that things are progressing the way you want them to, and that you're not just beating up on potentially inferior competition? And I think that's a really important focus that this coaching staff needs to develop. They can't get lulled into, hey, we're playing better because it looks better on the field because you got guys that you're just more athletic than or more talented than, that you can dominate the line of scrimmage. The Buckeyes better dominate the line of scrimmage in 2 weeks when they play Akron. They better run the football for 7 yards a touch, right? They better throw the ball at will down the field. That has to happen. But you can't, I think you can't get too lulled into saying, hey, things are getting better because you're playing against teams that you should do that too.
Yeah, and I mean, that was something that I've kind of been thinking about a lot recently too with this Tulsa game coming up. Is last year we didn't really see like down games. I understand there was, Michigan State wasn't good. They were supposed to play at Illinois. That would have been that probably would have been a 40, 50 point blowout. But this, it just so different. Like, you almost don't expect these games to even really matter in the grand scheme of things. It kind of almost makes me wish that they would play a good team every single week, if that makes sense. But it is very difficult for you to kind of gauge, like you said, how well they've improved, just because, you're just going to show up and you're going to be so much more athletic than everybody else. And you're going to be able to out-scheme them just because your coaches are going to be better than their coaches. There's a reason that, you're at the Big Ten, you're at Ohio State, and they're, in the AAC and at Tulsa and those kind of things. So, these games, they should just be able to show up and win by 30, 40, 50 points. So it's very difficult to then judge based upon that. So, there's those finer details. Are they moving to the ball quickly? Are they staying in their assignments? Those kind of things, those are going to be important.
RK chimes in, and if you have questions or comments you'd like to share, we'd certainly encourage you to do that. RK says, with the defensive front unable to hold the edge, why not cut JTT and Jack Sawyer loose? That's a question I think a lot of fans want to know an answer to right now, because, again, if we're being objective about it, Zach Harrison and Tyreek Smith played okay. I don't think they played great these first 2 weeks of the season. That's certainly evident in sack totals. It's evident in tackles for loss. It's evident in contain at times. I think JTT has seen the field more than Jack Sawyer. That's just my sort of my impression, my memory at the moment. I don't have snap counts in front of me, but I think Tuimoloau has been out there a little bit more than Jack Sawyer so far. But I do remember one specific play that Jack made a tight end look silly against Oregon this past week and got into the backfield. Anthony Brown just got the ball out before before Jack had a chance to get to him. Ryan Day said today pretty matter-of-factly, they're looking at all things on the defense. They're going to make changes because they have to, and whether that's responsibilities on the coaching staff, whether it's personnel, and whether it's changing scheme, they're willing to figure out what it's going to take, and that might be putting other guys in. Maybe you will see JTT and Jack Sawyer more often.
Well, and if you remember, JT also had a key pass breakup late in the fourth quarter as well. So, I think a lot of it comes down to, and this is just kind of my observation from the sidelines, is it seems, and this is obviously an issue with defenses in general, is when they start to think too much, when they're worried about, mentally plugging gaps and those kind of things, they don't play as quickly. And it makes me wonder, if you put someone like Sawyer and JT and they're freshmen, they don't have a whole bunch of experience, the game's kind of fast to them, are they just moving, would they play better just because they're not going to be in their mind, thinking of those things? They're just going to play fast because that's all they know. They're just reacting to it. They're not overthinking. And maybe that is something that, could benefit them if they do put them in those kind of situations.
It's a really interesting thought. I hadn't considered that. And maybe that could be helpful. Yeah. Two quotes that Ryan Day had that really stood out to me from today's press conference. He's basically asked about, his level of frustration in having to remove himself from his usual routine of focusing on the offense and specifically the quarterbacks and having to dive more into the defensive side of the ball, and basically just how that is, taking his time. And he said, quote, "Yeah, I'm not happy about that at all. That's part of the deal for me to do what I need to do on offense. I need the defense really on point, the special teams really on point. I need Mark Pantoni to do a great job in recruiting, Mick Mariotti to handle strength and conditioning. And the minute that I get taken away for those type of things, then it affects everything else that's going on offense. So yeah, to be honest with you, I'm disappointed." To me, that was Ryan Day spreading the blame around and not driving the bus over Kerry Coombs because Ryan's a professional. But there's no indication that Mick Mariotti has not done a good job in strength and conditioning or that Mark Pantoni's not doing his job in recruiting. Special teams, it has largely been fine. I guess there was one mediocre punt, but Jesse Mirko had two great punts this weekend. I think that was Ryan's, way of essentially just trying to ease the situation. But yeah, it's pretty obvious that he's not happy. He's not spending all his time on offense.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's just kind of the situation that he's in. You almost look at head coaches at these big time programs, unless they're, Ryan is very obviously involved in the offense just because that's the kind of mind he is. But you look at, you say, okay, well, they're almost acting more as a general manager of it all. They do the recruiting, they put coaches in positions to then put those players in position to succeed. Like it's kind of like a top down kind of thing. And when you take him away from doing that, saying, "Oh, now I have to focus more on defense," like that to me is a direct reflection on Kerry Coombs, because I mean, the whole part of the thing last year was, okay, well, Coombs was the defensive coordinator, but he was also the cornerbacks coach. And we took him away from the cornerbacks coach because it needed to give him more reign to be able to go and cover the defense as a whole, and give him that responsibility. And now it's like, okay, well, now he has someone in his back pocket who's making sure that he's doing those things. That back pocket person happens to be head coach Ryan Day. So it's like, that's not really a great endorsement to me. Obviously you don't want to back over your defensive coordinator because you want to give him time to improve. You want to give him the ability to respond to it. I mean, the Ohio State football program has been talking for years about E plus R equals O. The event plus response equals the outcome, and you can't have an outcome without a response. So, obviously you don't want to do that, but it really puts him in a very difficult position.
Got another listener question here. What's the deal with Sevyn Banks? He's not injured, but isn't playing. That was another topic in today's press conference. Sevyn Banks was on the unavailable list for week 1 against Minnesota. He was not available that week, but he was taken off of that game day status report for the Oregon game and did not get in. And Ryan Day was asked that straight out, essentially, where is he? What's the deal? And Ryan basically said, he's healthy enough to play, just hasn't played yet. It's not a condemnation of his health at the moment. And I think perhaps it could have something to do with the fact that Denzel Burke's played pretty well so far, and Cameron Brown came off of the unavailable list. And I thought Cameron Brown had a great game. I mean, he's basically the one guy on defense I walked away from Saturday's game with saying, gee, this guy's playing pretty good football, and having him back there's a real difference maker. So I think the answer to the question there about Sevyn Banks, maybe he's struggling to get on the field because Denzel Burke is playing well and Cam Brown played so well when he came back.
Yeah, and I think him obviously missing a good portion, if not all of fall camp, as he kind of was working his way back from that injury. That allowed Denzel to kind of take that step forward. And it's very difficult to take somebody off the field who's been working with the ones for how long and take him off because there's somebody with seniority over top of him. And I definitely want to kind of echo what you said about Cam Brown. He did play really well. And he even, I don't know if very many people noticed this, but he ended up having a brace on his right leg or on his right knee in the second half of that game. So he was still dealing with something, but he was out there, giving the effort and trying to make up for that.
Yeah, really impressive game for him. This comment's kind of hilarious because it makes me think of something here. Anyone have Marcus Freeman's number? I heard somebody in the press box, I don't remember who it was off the top of my head, but somebody said something half jokingly about, let's call Notre Dame and offer to trade them Kerry Coombs and one of our backup quarterbacks for Marcus Freeman and see if they would do it. I don't think Notre Dame needs a quarterback right now, but it was a funny thought for sure. And obviously Marcus Freeman is I know you love Marcus Freeman, Andrew, and I certainly enjoyed what he did at Cincinnati and think pretty highly of his ability. So I can see why Buckeye fans would be frustrated that he is coaching in South Bend instead of Columbus.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Notre Dame's defensive effort in the first two games, the overtime win over Florida State and then the kind of come from behind win over Toledo, I don't think that those are necessarily indicative of his credentials as a defensive coordinator. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of one of those things you would love to see the parallel universe kind of thing of like, what if they had him? Because like he's clearly getting the best out of some players on that defense already. Like Kyle Hamilton, he had 2 interceptions in the first game. I wasn't sure about the second game because we were obviously doing post game for the Oregon game, but he's going to turn Kyle Hamilton into a first-round pick, and Kyle Hamilton was a 3-star prospect coming out of high school. So, if you're putting your players in a position to succeed and do their best, like that's all you ask for from a defensive coordinator.
We'll wrap this up here from today's press conference with just a couple of other quick notes. It was made public yesterday when Ryan Day popped on Buckeye Roundtable that Josh Proctor's done for the year. Didn't specify on the exact nature of his injury, but it's pretty obviously a right leg injury. That really sucks. I hate that for Josh. I hate that for the secondary. And the Buckeyes better figure out what they're going to do at safety because we've documented now for 48 hours that the safety play has not been good enough. Not trying to signal out anybody in particular, but Bryson Shaw has seen a lot of those snaps, and he's made some good plays, but he's also made a lot of really bad decisions, and it's been costly. The Buckeyes have to evaluate options back there beyond him as well.
One thing that I don't think is necessarily being talked about enough is if you look back when Alex Finch was Ohio State's defensive coordinator, the only two defensive backs that he brought on in that cycle were Bryson Shaw and Ronnie Hickman. So it makes me wonder, like, are the Buckeyes, are they at a deficit at that position because something that Grinch did 3 years ago? Like, that is something that I will give Kerry Coombs because he's kind of dealing with the ramifications of not being the one who recruited at that position and expecting those kind of players to stand up. But at the same time, makes you wonder what happened. Like, where's Court Williams? They talked about how much of an impact he was making before he got hurt last year. He was somebody who they heaped his praises, during fall camp again this year. So, where does he figure into this? Lathan Ransom, he's been playing cornerback, but I think that he could move back there. Then you have Ryan Watts, big body, cornerback that a lot of people thought maybe would move to a safety in college, and he might get a chance there. So there's plenty of options. So it's going to be really interesting to see how these next 4 or 5 weeks, like they kind of, fix that and fill those spots.
I don't want to dive too deep down the coaching carousel domino effect that could come here. I think that's maybe a conversation for a different stream. I want to keep this focused on today, but obviously the firing of Clay Helton in season is semi-rare at a Power 5 school. You just don't see that a ton, especially for a program that, he has largely led to winning games. I think I want to say it was like 40-22 or something in his time there. I mean, it's not like he was a dumpster fire, although the loss to Stanford probably could be described that way. That was awful. Anyways, there's rumors flying left and right about Luke Fickell and, Mike Bone, the athletic director at USC, used to be the AD at Cincinnati. He hired Fickell there. That's obviously been a home run hire for that program. Might this be Fickell's exit strategy out of Cincinnati? I think there's a whole bunch of that kind of stuff that we can get into, and I just think that would get us way off topic. So we'll dive into that soon. But Ryan Day did say, just to kind of wrap this up today, quote, "We are going to make some adjustments, some changes. We have to, but I'd rather not get into all that publicly right now. You want to act, not overreact. You have to make sure you do things the right way and you allow people to do their job. But when it gets to a certain point, you have to get things fixed, and that's what we're going to do." I thought that was a pretty wise way of just kind of getting your hands around the situation. This isn't good. We know it. We're going to fix it, and we're not going to air our dirty laundry. I thought that was the right way to handle it. And so now the Buckeyes have to put their money where their mouth is and figure it out. And, when you're in the middle of the season, it's hard to make drastic changes, especially when they're needed. But maybe it's a good thing that this happened with this portion of the schedule coming up, because Ohio State should beat Tulsa and Akron and Rutgers and Maryland before they, have to really face the meat grinder of the Big Ten.
Yeah, and really this is kind of, if you take away COVID and all of the difficulties associated with that, I think this is really the first bout of adversity that Ohio State has really faced under Ryan Day, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how he and the rest of the coaching staff responds. I think he's not afraid to make those calls, because when he took the job, he got rid of Greg Schiano and brought in people like Jeff Hafley. He makes good decisions. He's not afraid to make hard decisions. So, this is kind of one of those things you just want to see how it moves forward. And, when it comes time, he, made the right decision and allowing it to get fixed, or he's going to have to kind of reassess it in a couple weeks or a couple months and say, well, look, it didn't work, and we're going to move forward from that, and then put the program in a better position moving forward.
So the Buckeyes and the Tulsa Golden Hurricane coming up on Saturday afternoon at 3:30, and all eyes are on the defensive side of the ball for Ohio State. This has been the Buckeye Report for Andrew Lind. I'm Brendan Gulick. Check out all the latest news and information across all of our social media channels and over on BuckeyesNow.com. If you're on our YouTube channel, we would certainly appreciate it if you'd consider subscribing to our content. We'll see you soon. The Buckeyes getting ready and trying to fix some of these crazy changes coming on the defensive side of the ball.